Hey everybody, we are live again. This is the month of September, but it feels like we're nearing the end of the year. These months have almost, I felt like, been speeding up these last couple of weeks. I needed just to slow down a little bit. Welcome back to another Tuesday. All of our guests who have joined us, we're in week 9, having a phenomenal time, having educational conversations to uplift, encourage, and support our Black community. We don't have enough conversations about that. So we have been intentional about making sure that each and every week we spend some time bringing in some phenomenal guests to talk about some of the things that are affecting our community, things that we can grow from, improve from, and be better in. We have a phenomenal group tonight, as always, but I'm especially excited about this group. We have 3 educated, strong Black women, and I really don't think we do enough to really push and support and hear the voices of our sisters. So I wanted to make sure we did that in the first week of this month. Tonight, we are talking about understanding your singleness, but for the month of September, here's the theme, y'all. Now, here it is: single, sex, and relationships, navigating life and Black love in the modern age, right? A conversation that I know many of you have with your girlfriends in the car when you're riding into work, or most of you are probably working remotely now, so you're probably having those conversations in the middle of the day. But however you have those conversations, I think it is very important and paramount to be able to have conversations where people just don't agree with you. Right. We tend to be in social circles where when we say something, people tend to agree with us. But I want to make sure that we are supported by folks who can listen and then think through what we're going through and assist us where we are rather than just always saying yes. So tonight, I want to introduce Nicole Yancey, Danielle Germain, and then Dr. Chris Marsh. They are phenomenal, I'll tell you, in their own right. When they posted tonight's event on their social media pages, I didn't tell you guys this yet, but I'm going to just put it out there. My Facebook page grew almost 100 people. And I know that wasn't me. It wasn't me. In 24 hours, since the 3 of you have posted tonight's event, my Facebook followers grew 100 people. I need to bring y'all back every week. That's crazy. I've never seen that kind of increase in 24 hours. So I appreciate that. I do hope that all of your friends and close friends and family members are joining us tonight. But Nicole, Danielle, and Dr. Chris Marsh, if you would just share a little bit, 60 to 90 seconds about kind of who you are, what you're excited about tonight, or just your work in general. I don't want to read your bios. I know you don't want me to read it either. Let's just have some fun tonight with this conversation.
First.
Yeah, Nicole, you first.
Oh, I'm first? Okay. Hi, I'm Nicole Yancey. And I am the creative director and founder of The Sin of Being Single. But my handle is Sin of Being Single on Instagram. And yeah, I love this conversation, hence the name, The Sin of Being Single, which is, it was birthed out of, as when I turned around 30, 31, there was this big push to find someone. Everybody just pick one. It's almost like musical chairs. Pick one, find one, anyone will do. And so I just noticed this trend, just, amongst peers, just in my age group period, go out, get someone. And I was like, wow, it's almost like it's a sin to be single. And so that's how Sin of Being Single was birthed. And I just really want, I try to encourage singles, whether it's your desire to be married or not be married, like really going inward first and getting to know yourself, because I believe that will really impact your relationships, whether that be romantic or just in life, and it'll impact your entire life. Relationships, purpose, passion, knowing yourself is really important. And sometimes there's such a hyper focus on finding someone, getting someone, that we get sort of pushed aside. So that's who I am. I'm Nicole.
Great, Nicole.
From West Virginia.
It's wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you again. Danielle?
Thank you.
Hi. So my name is Danielle Germain. I am a senior at American University studying American Studies and Journalism and Political Science. I won't bore you guys with like the typical icebreakers, but I'm really excited to be on this webinar tonight. I was actually, Dr. Ali was one of my favorite professors while at AU. I took his Black masculinities course, and it's been amazing, like, actually watching how much our relationship has grown. Like, Dr. Ali, we had coffee before, I really got into his course and got to know him. And we had awesome conversations about what it just means to, be a Black woman at AU. And just, he really helped me kind of mold and shape. And I really appreciate being a part of this conversation, because I feel like sometimes kids, I should say, young adults my age aren't always included in this conversation, because sometimes, our relationships aren't taken seriously when we're young and we're in love and we're not, super locked into all that it means to be in a relationship. So I'm actually excited to kind of share like a new perspective about what that means.
Danielle, it's awesome to have you on the show. Danielle, you had a Black Lives Matter movement event last week that
Yes.
you invited me to, and I was one of the speakers. It was a phenomenal event.
Thank
Danielle was
you.
doing things in the city of Washington, D.C. She is certainly an activist, a strong Black woman who, when she enters a room, she has a commanding presence. I am excited to see where her life takes her in the next 5 to 10 years.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, Chris.
Yes, so I am a professor at the University of Maryland, College Park. I'm a sociologist and a demographer. I am currently writing a book looking at the demographic shift in the Black middle class, away from married couples to young Black professionals who aren't married and don't have any children. The name of the book, the title of the book is The Love Jones Cohort. I'm drawing from the movie The Love Jones, and I'm also drawing from a traditional demographic term of cohort, put it together and come up with the Love Jones Cohort. One of the central themes in the book is thinking about how singles accumulate wealth and how they disseminate wealth, because we have to have a conversation about singlehood and about the economic implications in that. So the book really tackles that. It also talks about mental and physical health, where singles are choosing to live, and their dating practices. And I have to dovetail with what was said earlier. You really want to make sure that you take care of yourself first. Make sure you're on solid footing before you try to get into a relationship. Everywhere I go, every opportunity I have, in every public space, I tell people I see a therapist every Monday morning from 10 to 11. I'm trying to take the stigma out of mental health and think about how we need to be healthy as individuals before we start to partner with anybody.
That's it.
All right, we can go home. That's it. We're done.
That's great, Chris. Chris, Love Jones is one of my favorite movies. Nia Long, Lorenz Tate. I don't know how many times I've watched that movie. That's a great title for your book. I can't wait to read it. Please be sure to announce it again before the show is over. I want everyone who's listening to be on the lookout for your show. If you're joining us for the first time tonight, we are on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and then the website, ourvillageinaction.com. You can watch us in any of those three places. And it's been exciting these last 9 weeks. You all have been inviting a friend and a friend and a friend and a friend, and we have grown tremendously. We're averaging almost 1,200 views a week. Want to continue to push that and grow. We have really helped our Black community in ways that I wish that I had growing up, right? We talked last month all about establishing credit, the economic empowerment of the Black community, home ownership, just stuff they don't teach you in college, right? And so it has been some amazing, amazing discussion. Super excited about tonight. So glad you're all tuning in. Nicole, Chris, and Danielle and I are going to enter into a very conversation-like discussion. We're not going to ping pong questions back and forth. So you all just really eavesdropping on some phenomenal conversation tonight with three strong Black women who are doing some amazing things, right? And so it's just an eavesdrop. I won't tell anybody that you listen. I won't even tell nobody that you took notes tonight, because I'm sure a few of you probably pull over to the side of the road and go record this session because of all the good stuff that's going to come out of it. All right, ladies, so it's 12 minutes after 8. I do want to kind of jump into the first question, and then we all just kind of take a stab at it from our own personal experience. The question is there a negative stereotype? And I say is there because I have heard of these stereotypes, but I want to know y'all's take. Is there a negative stereotype for women who remain single? If yes, why is there this stereotype that's negative? And then the part B of that, is it a double standard for men to remain single? Thoughts? Is it a negative stereotype?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the basis of my entire brand, the sin of being single. It's a hyperbole. People act like it is a sin to be single, and then don't add on top of that being past a certain age and not having children. And so it's just like, what are you doing? Hopefully God is going to send you someone soon to lift you out of the depths of this sin, of this despair that you must be in, because you're over the age of 32 and you're not coupled or you're not married. And so there's two different things. It's like being married is one thing, that's the ultimate prize. And then you have, or just being coupled. Don't you want someone? Is there something wrong? Do you maybe you like women? Perhaps it's just, there has to be some reason. It's okay if you like women, just say that. And so, yes, there's definitely a stigma attached to not being coupled consistently. Break up with one, you should be getting another one soon. Like, don't take too long in between breakups, And so that's my take. Yes.
Right.
Yes, definitely.
I absolutely agree. One way of thinking about it is to push back on the question and say, okay, well, what are some of the terms that people have for older adults that are single? We have cat lady, we have spinster, we have old maid. So that already tells you that there's a stigma associated with being single, because you have these negative terms that go with singlehood. And notice, I said terms that really relate to women. What are the terms that we think about for men? For men, it might be a gigolo. But what happens, it's like, oh, there's something clearly wrong with women. That's why they're not partnered. That's why they don't have children. But men haven't made the decision to convert. So they have a different kind of stigma than do women. They just haven't decided to settle down yet. Women can't settle down because there's simply something fundamentally wrong with them. And one of the things, I've talked about singlehood for a very long time. And one of the things that I often tell people, when someone asks you, like, why aren't you married and why don't you have children? Ask them, what do you mean by that? It pushes them all the way back, and it forces them to look at the inherent bias in the statement that they're making. So when someone asks you, like, well, you're not married, you don't have children, politely to say, what do you mean by that? And keep pushing until they understand the error in their ways. I'm like, I am more than just my partner. I'm more than just my fertility patterns.
So I think for me, it's a little bit of like a 360. I wouldn't actually say that there is for younger women a negative stereotype to like people that want to remain single. And the reason why I say that is because, I don't know, young college students like my age, I think women nowadays think that there is a stigma that like we have to be like Quavo and Sweetie and be this like celebrity status and like think that we have to be the super cute like relationship goals. Like we don't see that as a negative right now, because right now people are trying to be relationship goals. So it's very different for people that are born during different generations, because what you guys might see as like a negative stereotype is like people my age want to be in relationships or are actually trying to actually find good, stable relationships. And later on, I can get into why that's harder, but I think that it's actually kind of reverse.
Yeah, Danielle brings up a really great point. This is kind of like this notion of crossover, where at some point it's positive to be independent, to kind of do your own thing and or think about relationships. But at some point, we have to decide what that age is. But at some point, you now become unattractive, you become a problem, and you become stigmatized. And as you age, those stereotypes are reinforced.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, it's definitely, because in my 20s, college, campus, everybody's coupling up. It's just like, yes. And then once people graduate and then they go, they get their master's or whatever they're doing, once they hit 30, it's like for a lot of people in their minds, it's the natural next step.
Yeah.
And it does not matter who it is. It does not, compatibility is not at the top of the list.
Yeah.
Is this person the person that I've been with them since college. I've been with, they were with me through my master's program, my PhD program, this, that, and the third. Or this is just the person that I just landed on when I woke up and decided, oh, wow, I like my job. I like this. I'm doing this, the next logical step. And so it is it's a staircase. And so that's, when I hit my 30s, that's when I began to see these patterns of very unhealthy relationships. people coming together and marriages lasting 2 to 3 years.
Mhm.
People coming together and marriage, just these patterns. People by 38 being on their third wife, or their third husband. And so, yes, it's definitely age, because in your 20s, and plus it's different, it's easier, especially if you're in college, if you're really involved in a young church community. There's people, it's like popcorn. You're meeting different people. My first boyfriend lived down the hall from me. My first college boyfriend literally lived about 8 doors down. How easy is that? Like, there he is. He's right there. Okay. I like you. You like me. The guy from high school is tripping. Hey, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I definitely.
Why is it that there's this like special age? I think Danielle raises a great point. As a young college student, there's this level of independence, level of discovery, exploration, and finding yourself. But then, Nicole, I hear you say when you push into the 30s, this kind of next step, right? This whether it's called natural selection or whether the pressure from family members. I mean, why is it that you have to be into this next step? Why can't, as a Black woman, you decide if you want to go to Dubai for 2 years and teach? It's cool to do that, right? I don't understand why there's this next step of being in a relationship. So y'all talk about that a little bit.
I think for people, like, it comes down to, I mean, you raised a great point, right? There is a stigma, okay? Like, people believe that there's a next step because that's all we've been taught. Like, I don't want to make it so like super formal, but like the way I think about it is, if I'm raised by my mother, who was the one that was mostly home taking care of us, my instinct in my head is, okay, when I'm older and when I reach my mom's age, I'm going to be a mother. Mm-hmm. And before that, I'm going to take those steps and get my degrees like my mom did, so that she can provide for me and my sister while my dad's working. Like, it's this idea that it's like the paternal and maternal like figureheads that we're taught from a very, very young age. And I think that translates into relationships sometimes. I'm a relationship type of person. I don't like sleeping around with several different people and being all over the place. It's too much work. So I like to just be settled. One person, that's where my focus and energy and time is going into. But at the same time, a lot of girls my age, they don't have that same mentality. Their mentality is, I got to get to the next thing, whatever that next thing looks like.
So this is an absolutely great conversation, and I appreciate the conversation. So I think what happens is that we have kind of like the life course, and there's stages along the life course, and that life course trajectory is very traditional. So like we said, I think Nicole said it's like you go to school, you get your degree, you get married, you buy a house, you have children, you kind of do all of those things on the life course. And there aren't many other options that are available, or there aren't many other options that we really talk about. Singlehood can be an option, but we think about it from a very traditional kind of way. And as long as we continue to think about it in very traditional kind of ways, we're going to end up in those relationships that are unhealthy and are toxic, but they allow us to check off that box on the life station stops. And one of the things we have to think about right now is we're sitting in COVID. And as a demographer, you've probably heard friends on social media say, you're going to have a whole bunch of children named like Rona and stuff after this. Here's what we know as demographers. That's not the case. So if this was like a storm or something where we know that there was an end in sight, you might see an uptick in fertility. But we're in a space where people are quite unstable and we don't know what the end is going to look like. So we're actually going to see a downtick in fertility, and we're also going to see an uptick in divorce. If we look at other kind of pandemics and other issues that we've had in America, we see the divorce rates are high. Why might that be? Because, again, getting back to this traditional notion of the life course. On the life course, you get married, whether you like a person or not. Now you're stuck in the house with a person for 24 hours and you realize, I don't like myself, and I don't like the person I'm in a relationship with. So let me get out of the relationship with myself, with the person I'm in a relationship with, and work on myself. So divorce rates are going to be high on the other end of this. And there's demographic literature to suggest that is in fact the case, because we're simply marrying for the sake of getting married, and we're simply marrying because of social pressure.
Right. That's heavy. So let's talk about a little. Let's backtrack. So talk about singleness for a minute before getting into a relationship. Whether you have either been in a bad relationship, got out of a relationship. I had two calls today from two women who husbands have passed, and now they're looking to date again. Right. So they're also single. Right. So what I think the question that I've heard before tonight is, what should women do in their singleness to prepare before even getting into this toxic relationship, or a relationship that means them no good, or a relationship where they say to themselves, why did I even get in this in the first place?
Right. So, but is it just women that are having those conversations, or shouldn't men be having those conversations?
Absolutely. That was
Now you got now. Hold on.
Right.
Now hold on. You know you got
Right.
three women on here. That ain't getting ready to go down.
They should. Right. I think because of the flyer and three women on the flyer tonight is why we got all the traction. Like, hey, we want to know. We want to know. We need to have a guy session for sure. But at least from y'all's lens, why is it like? How can you prepare in your singleness, right, for a healthy relationship?
I oh, should I mean, I won't. Everyone does it differently. I had a spiritual approach, right? So how I prepare for my singleness. I mean, going through my singleness and getting ready to be in a relationship, or forget even thinking about a relationship, just thinking about me.
Right.
That was spiritual for me. That was me connecting with God. That was me asking God to show me the things that I needed in a man and that a man needed in me. And that takes time. That takes prayer. That takes a lot of journeying in yourself. And I think that for me was super important. And I think a lot of women have that one outlet or a couple outlets of where they practice their singleness, or where they kind of embrace their singleness, whether that be in their work or their a fun life or whatever. Different women do it different ways.
Okay.
All right. So I'm gonna approach it in a slightly different way. I want to kind of turn on just a bit, pivot just a bit. I don't know that I would use the word prepare for your singleness. I actually think I'd rather use the more empowering word and say, let's celebrate your singleness. Because until you're happy and healthy and whole with yourself, there's nothing else you can't finish the rest of that sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So you got to celebrate who you are. And I appreciate COVID. I appreciate these two global pandemics we're sitting in, because I think as individuals, we all have to be comfortable with the uncomfortableness of who we are and sit
Right.
with who we are, because there are not a lot of distractions right now.
Right.
So we have to understand who we are and be very happy and content with who we are. And then if something adds on to that, that's perfectly fine. But the end can't be something over there and you're not happy with yourself here. The end has to be my own individual happiness.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Celebrate singleness. That's good.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's it. Like whether it be that being okay with who you are is everything. Learning yourself, learning your purpose, because then if someone does come along and you choose to be coupled, then you're not in a situation where knowing what you need, your core values, your core needs is everything.
Right.
That keeps me. So people are like, oh my gosh, you've been single for a long time, because I know me. And so I don't really need to date a whole bunch, I don't really speed date, in life, because I don't really need to, because it really sometimes only takes one or two conversations, because I am actively doing the work on me,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm actively learning me and growing and loving me. And so if I meet someone who out the gate does not match up with one of my core needs, my core values, I don't need to go out on 5 dates to figure out what I already know, because I know me. And so it's just really, really, really important, whether it be a spiritual path. And that's another thing, like you need to know your spiritual path and how important is it to you, and how does that work in a relationship? Are you okay with being with someone whose spiritual path doesn't match yours? These are things that we should know before we couple with someone else. We don't have to be with someone for 5 years or get married and have 3 kids and say, oh, well, Bob was like this when you met him.
Right.
But what? This is who Jimmy has been. He didn't trick you. you defrauded him, and acting like this was okay. And so again, it's just like embracing yourself, learning yourself, knowing yourself, and being able to spend time with yourself. That's everything that Dr. Chris Marsh said. I mean, it's just really, really important, beyond important, to know who you are and what your needs are. But I feel like we're so accustomed to settling in life. You know, it's like, oh, well, I really hate my job, but I'll stay here for another 20 years. This generation, the last two generations don't do that as much, but it still happens. I mean, I'm going to get a degree. I have no desire to work in this field. I'm just getting a degree. That shows up in our relationships. That type of attitude shows up throughout our lives. Like, oh, well, I really need this and I really want that. And this is who I really am. But for the sake of a relationship, I'm going to diminish who I am to be coupled with someone. And that comes with not really loving and embracing and knowing who you are.
Right. And that's why we have to start having the conversation about singlehood and really engaging with the conversation. So we take the stigma out of it. People like, I have different options. I have different avenues. It doesn't have to be this traditional heteronormative husband, wife, 2.5 children and a black picket fence.
Right.
Black
picket fence. I like that.
It's reference to a book by Mary Patillo who wrote about black neighborhoods. Yeah. And it's called Black Picket Fences. Black picket fence. But here's the thing. If the partner and the children don't happen, is that an epic failure?
It shouldn't be.
It should not be.
Oh, absolutely not.
Because what you hear people say, it's like, okay, well, especially I interviewed 80 people for the book. So I do mostly quantitative work, but I did more qualitative work. I interviewed individuals, both men and women. And one of the things that I found in my work with the people that I interviewed is that the women were hoping that it would happen, and the men were just waiting for it when they wanted it to happen. Women were hoping, and men were just trying to wait to decide when they wanted to make it happen. So if it does not happen, if we think about it from a purely demographic perspective, and if we're talking, and I'm all for Black love and Black marriage. I am like a huge proponent of Black love and Black marriage. But if we know demographically, if a professional Black woman wants to marry a professional Black man, there's a gender imbalance. There are more women than there are men. So if we look at it simply from a numbers perspective, for some Black women, it's just not going to happen. Does that mean it's a failure? And if we're not careful, people often think, if I'm not married, I don't have children, that means I'm a failure. And we've got to push back against that narrative.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I agree. The narrative is awful that it has been so traditional for so long, and we've adopted it every generation, right?
Right.
Chris, you bring up some great points, and I read that study as well, that the number of African-American women who are college educated, if they're looking to get into relationships with someone of the opposite sex who's college educated, is a very, very, very small, minute number.
But also who's Black, because we know that there's a whole bunch of interracial work out there that talks about how Black women are the least likely to be winked at or liked on these social media sites. There's a book written by a law professor, Richard Banks, I believe was his name. And I think the title of the book was Is Marriage for White People? And so he puts the onus on Black women to say, you know what, part of the reason why we have such low marriage rates is because Black women aren't willing to date outside their race. But the reality is, even if women were willing, Black women were willing to date outside of our race, other racial and ethnic groups don't find us attractive. And that's across the board. That's Black, white, Asian, Latino. All of them are least likely to wink at us on dating websites.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
You guys, you all three of you mentioned just kind of, and I love how you mentioned it, Chris, the celebration of being single, and know, all of you talked about like being single before entering into a relationship. The first time that I can remember being single for a number of years was when I was in my PhD program. And the PhD program felt very synonymous to this COVID. Like it was a pandemic in my life. And I have a few fraternity brothers online on the call tonight who were actually in similar programs at the same time. And I had to deal with me for the very first time. And I realized there were things about me that I didn't like.
Oh, yeah.
I never saw that before. There were things about me I didn't like. And I was thinking, oh, while I try to project what I don't like on someone else as if they're the problem.
Right.
It's me. So let me adjust and tweak these things that I don't like so I don't continue to project the negative things onto somebody else. And so I don't think that men also, because you mentioned men too, we don't give ourselves enough time to really think about ourselves and think about singleness and think about celebrating singleness, right? I went to the movies during my PhD program for the first time by myself and fell in love with it. I was like, wow, this is great. I should do this more often, right? But I never did that before. So I think for many men, at least speaking from the lens of a man, we're so used to being in a relationship, I think almost because we're dependent on it, right? We have not found the sense of independence outside of a relationship. So we attach ourselves to people. Attaching ourselves to people helps us to feel good about ourselves. But if we learn, as you said, Chris, to celebrate ourselves, I don't have to attach myself to nobody to feel good about me.
So here's what's so insidious about this. It's that you know that there's some issues with yourself. And instead of you addressing yourself, you're going to try to find people that are going to help you feel good about yourself. But you're not going to take the time to sit with yourself because you're not comfortable with yourself, but want to bring somebody into that relationship. And you know, you don't want to be with yourself. You're going to find somebody who's going to want to be with you. So it's insidious because we don't want to do the emotional work. It's hard. There are things about me that I do not like, period, full stop. But I have to sit with myself and be like, you know what? I understand. I'm like you. I can be very critical. I can take a very academic approach to emotions, and I can be as stubborn as a goat. I have to sit with all of that and kind of work through those nuances. I can't bring somebody else into this relationship with me until I work on me first. And we just don't do the emotional work. And I'm glad that you brought up the whole notion about the gender dynamic, because men really don't think that they have to do the emotional work. Emotional labor is a woman's job, and men don't have to do that. Men just need to be needed. You know, it's funny because I had a friend who he told me one day, he's like, Chris, you're not a ride and die. And I was like, excuse me? He's like, you're not a ride and die. And I said to him, I said, you know what? I want to be in a relationship. Well, after I read him from Amazing Grace to how sweet it is, I then pivoted to my academic self. And I said, listen, if you're thinking about a ride and die, which is a very problematic term in Black America, and we need to talk about that, right? So on two fronts. One, so you have people that are in relationships and they're staying there for the sake of the kids, and they're arguing and fighting and fussing and so on and so forth. What we know in the scientific literature is that children do best in a two-parent household with low conflict. Don't stay in that relationship just for the sake of the children, because children don't do well in volatile relationships. It's much better to be in single-parent loving households than be in an individual household and there's arguing and fighting. But anyways, so people stay in these relationships. I was like, but if you're talking about a ride and die, being somebody who's going to use, abuse, kill, destroy, lie, cheat, and you like brag about the fact that you can send your partner through this and they stayed with you, what does that say about you? And what does that say about your partner? That's an unhealthy, toxic relationship. And you should never brag about being with someone for 12 years and 11 of those were problematic. We just shouldn't do that. But in Black America, like, ooh, there's a badge of honor to say we've been in this thing for 20 years. But only 18 or 19 of those were good. Again, if we take the stigma out of singlehood, you could have left after year one and be like, I'm out, I'm done. But I think what happens is that we find relationships where we're needed and not wanted. And I'll come back to that in a second. So I said to my friend, I said, listen, I'm not that kind of ride and die. You're not going to talk to me any kind of way. You're not going to rob, steal, kill, and try to destroy me. And I'm going to stay there. We're going to brag about that. But let me tell you what is going to happen. I'm the kind of ride and die where you're going to evolve 20 times over 20 years. And I'm going to be there to support you every single way you evolve, because you surely should not be the same person that I met 20 years ago that I see 20 years later. As you evolve, I will fall in love with all 9 lives of you that I see. But if you think you're going to talk to me any kind of way and treat me any kind of way, that's not a relationship. That's not love. And two people got to look at themselves. One, the person that allows it, and two, the person that does it. But I want to be in a relationship where I'm wanted and I'm not needed. And a lot of men say, they want to be needed, but that's really unhealthy too, because you want to be in a relationship where you're wanted. I want to be here. I'm not needed. Because when you're needed, that becomes really exhausting, one. And once that need is met, are you still useful?
Yeah, yeah. If you're just joining tonight, we're having a great conversation with Nicole Yancey, Danielle Germain, and Dr. Chris Marsh about understanding your singleness, celebrating. Let's talk about that.
So,
Celebrating your
Yep.
singleness. I'm glad you said that earlier, Chris. Danielle, talk a little bit because I'm curious because we have so many different generations of singleness, right? And you represent, young, thriving college student, senior, about to graduate into the world. I would throw out all the people that you've interned for because you've done some phenomenal work, but I won't do that because I would want to embarrass you, all the great work you're doing. But Danielle, talk a little bit about being a single woman on a college campus and how being single does not necessarily mean you are actively open or you're actively looking for a relationship. How does that look on a college campus?
So I have a different perspective. So as you were saying that I'm not single, as you're saying single on a couch, my boyfriend is sitting right next to me. He's like, "You're not single? What are you talking about?" No, I'm not single. But I was the friend of my friend group that was in a relationship while she was in college, and that's a very different. That was in a relationship while she was in college. That was a very different experience for me. I think when you're on a college campus and you're new and you're beautiful and you're Black and you're meeting all these new people and you get caught up with Greek life and you get caught up with cookouts and all this other fun stuff, like it's a very different experience. Um, but I also think sometimes it's a necessary experience, right? Because being able to interact with Black men when you're single, being able to talk to, learn about, explore Black men, that's a privilege. That's something that when I was in high school, my I had one or two Black friends. Like I was one of two Black girls in my class, and then I had a very small group of Black men, brothers that I looked up to. I didn't have the opportunity to like really flourish in my Blackness and also like embrace what that you hit on Black love really quickly, but that's important, and that doesn't just mean Black love romantically. Black love can be sibling, that can be mom, that can be dad, that can be whoever, right? And I didn't get that experience because of where I grew up and where I was located. And when I got to college, I got to be embraced and loved by Black men in a different way, right? And I think that is extremely valuable. While we're saying we're celebrating our singleness, I also want to make sure that we're taking the time to celebrate what it means to explore singleness and also what it means to explore a relationship. Because I think like kids my age, I couldn't imagine myself being on a panel like this. I'm sitting here and I'm like watching you guys talk and I'm like, this is so cool to me because I don't get to talk to people that are a little bit older than me about relationships. I don't have those resources. So, all of that is to say that I think it's an important journey that a lot of Black women need to experience.
Yeah, no, that was a great point. Yeah, and same question, Nicole and Chris. Just super curious as you navigate singleness. Just, I guess, Nicole, you and talk about your sense of being single is on Instagram. You have a great following, right? Talk about some of the things that you discuss in the sense of being single Instagram page, and maybe what some of the events that you've had. Um, is your organization to help people celebrate singleness and then get into relationships, or just to simply celebrate singleness?
I started out at I think we met over 10 years ago, or maybe
Over 10.
about, yeah. And I have a heart for relationships, healthy relationships. And, I was like, oh, you know what, maybe I want to start an organization, and I'm not married, but like that's centered around marriage. And then I realized, no, it's all about the individual. And so, because by the time these people say I do, it's very difficult to get them to backtrack. Once they say this person is the one, even in engagement, it's very difficult for a professional or a pastor or a friend or someone to come in and show them blaring, like, there's issues here. Nobody wants to hear that. They've already made up their minds. So I was like, really the work is within singleness. So that's where I sort of started. But it's for who? The Center Being Single, it's about for singles, specifically people that are not married. I have a lot of people that are, they're dating or whatever. They may be in relationships, but there's just like such a stigma still attached to like being coupled, period. So whether they want to get married or they don't want to get married or they want to be single forever, some people just don't want a relationship, not that type of relationship, not a committed relationship. They don't want to be in a long-term committed relationship, or they do and they don't want to ever marry that person. So it's for everyone across the board. Anyone that says I'm single, whether that be marriage or just not being coupled, that's what I talk about. And so I mainly talk about really dealing with yourself within, looking within, because it's really about, to me, finding your version of your best life, your version of happily ever after for you, not you and someone else, not you and 3 kids and a husband and the black picket fence, but really just getting to know you, healing from past relationships, even if that means you're not going to be in another relationship down the road, but just healing and growing and learning yourself. That's sort of my focus for the sin of being single.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, embracing your singleness is just so important across the board, and it shows up in every area of your life. I personally have had the privilege of having a grandmother who was applauded by singleness until the day she left this earth. She loved it. She was like, I know you're not going to be no Judge Joe Brown chick. She used to watch Judge Joe Brown. Apparently, going on, they were always paying somebody's phone bill, and then they're, over some type of rent disagreement. And she was like, I know that you will be with one that is right for you. And she never said, when are you going to give me great grandbabies? When are you going to get married? When? Why not that one? Choose this one. You're too picky. I never got that from her. And my mother wants grandchildren for me, of course, and she wants to see me married. But even with my parents, neither of them push me towards anyone or to do anything. And so I try to share that with others because it's so important, because there's so much toxic.
I was actually thinking, because it's so funny that you say like you didn't have anyone push on you, like being in a relationship. I think that goes for like a lot more people, like in maybe generations that look like mine, because I think that's when it becomes more of a like opportunity for us to actually choose to celebrate our singleness or choose to celebrate our relationship, because it's not being forced on me. My parents' goal was not me finding a boyfriend. My goal was, Danielle, I immigrated to this country, you need to get a degree and we need to make something shake. Like they were never pushing a man on me. And I also never saw that in my household. So I think that point that you made was extremely important, because I think now that, kind of influences how a lot of younger folks think. They don't feel forced. If I want to be single, fine. If I want to be by myself, great. Like it doesn't matter so much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's like, most of the pressure for me has come from my peer group. It's just like, what are you doing? Do you not want to have kids? Are you sure? I mean, like, what's wrong with him? You're too picky. And what I have found within my peer group is, and this doesn't, I'm not talking about close friends, because I don't have people close to me that I don't really deal with people that are, close to me that think in that way. But, just in general, just a group of women together and talking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What I have found is choosing singleness and choosing not to always be with someone or date someone or et cetera, is triggering for people, because it's like holding up a mirror. Well, if she is doing this, then what does that say about the marriage that I'm in, where I'm very unhappy? If she is chosen, if she's at this point in life, like 5 years ago, I was like, I'm going to quit adulting because I don't have any children and I'm not married and I don't have a house payment. I'm going to Paris and I'm going to study abroad. And that's what I did.
Yeah.
And it was the best. Oh my gosh, highly recommend. It was amazing. It was amazing. I loved it. I had the time of my life. Oh, it was great. And it was just like, you're just doing whatever, aren't you? I mean, you ain't even thinking about a man. I'm thinking about getting into University of Paris. That's what I'm thinking about right now. And but at 31 and 30, I was of the mindset that, it was like marriage. And then two people, a friend of mine, a guy who was just like, you know, you can really do whatever you want. You don't have a house payment. You don't have a car payment. I bought my car cash. He was like, you have the freedom to do whatever. I don't. I have this mortgage. I need to keep this government job. I can't really pursue my, you know, this film thing like that because I have bills. And you don't have that. And I was like, wow. And then a friend of mine, she had a condo that was like ruining her life. And she was like, man, Nicole, you have, you know, all this freedom. And that's when it clicked for me. I was like, I'm spending all this time worried about some fictitious husband or somebody in the future and these kids and all this stuff when I should be living my best. What does it look like right now? Me being single. What does my best life look like right now?
Yeah,
and that's what I started doing.
And I think men could do a better job, you know, embracing and celebrating, you know, women's singleness as well. Because I'm remembering conversations in my late 20s, early 30s, when we would be out, the guys night out, hanging with the frat, and they talk, oh, you know, this woman here, you know, she's got her own house, 6 figures, you know, she's beautiful, she's this and that. And then the question would be, well, why is she single? And then the next question would be, well, what's wrong with her?
Right.
And so I didn't hear that in my 20s when I was in college, like Danielle. It was when I got into my early 30s where I'm like, now that I'm thinking back, how do we even pose the question? Why does anything have to be wrong with her, right? A woman can choose to be and celebrate her singleness, but I think the narrative has been for so long, there must be something wrong with women who are beautiful and educated and great jobs and own their own homes and CEOs and all this other stuff, and you choose to be single. Nothing is wrong.
But there is something wrong that people don't talk about, and that is that those women, or what seems to be wrong, is usually those women are the type of women that have high standards, and that idea of like a high standard scares men. I think someone that has 6 figures has their own car, their own house, their own stuff. Like they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing for themselves. They're supporting themselves. Men see that as like, I don't know if men see that as like a red light or if that's like something scary, if it's intimidating. Maybe that's for another webinar. But you know, men kind of shrink when women shine, and I don't know why, but that's what I've seen.
Right. That kind of gets to the, and I jokingly say this with my friends, and like that's like getting back to the dichotomy between being wanted and needed. I was like, men sometimes like might fear or have some apprehension with a woman that's very independent and has her own, so they're going to find the woman that they need, that's needed. But the woman that's needed is the one that's going to throw bleach on your front lawn. The woman that's needed is going to scratch up your car. The woman that's needed is going to set your house on fire. The woman that you want, if it doesn't work out, like, baby, we go our separate ways and we're good. We're friends. We have a cordial conversation, exit interview, we move on.
Right.
But when you have those women that have it together all the time, like that needed woman's going to come back. I'm guaranteeing you that needed woman going to come back. That's going to come back to bite you. Speaking about women having their own, one of the things that I do in the book, and I think I interview people from 25 up to 65.
Chris, say your book again, because I want to make sure that those who are joining are here.
The Love Jones Cohort, Single and Living Alone in the Black Middle Class. It's coming out with Cambridge University Press, hopefully into this year or early next year. One of the things I talk about is like how singles decide to buy houses, when they decide to buy houses, and who are they going to disseminate their wealth to. Because wealth is usually transferred from parent to child. But if the second largest household in the Black middle class are people that are single and living alone, who are they going to transfer their wealth to? I hope whether you're 25 or you're 65, you have a living trust or a will in place. So if you do have assets, you know who these assets are going to go to. That's adulting. That's an adult decision. Don't wait for the husband. Don't wait for the wife. Don't wait for the same-sex relationship. Don't wait for the children. Make sure if you have assets, you know where your assets are going to go. And that's whatever your assets are, from a car to a house to some jewelry. Make sure you know where it's going to go. Don't wait until you're married to put those kind of things together. We should put those kind of things together now. And young folks don't really think about that. And that's one thing I'm really trying to.
We don't know it. Like, we don't have any. I'm sitting here like, I feel like I have some things to get together. Because like,
but that's what everybody says. They assume that they don't have anything. It's like, and you do have stuff. You know, so I'm talking about physical stuff. I ain't talking about the husband or the wife. I'm saying you have material stuff that you can make sure that you have set aside. And you know exactly where it's going to go. And it's like, okay, so you don't, and here's the flexibility and the freedom that Nicole talks about. So you don't have a partner, you don't have children, so you can decide who your wealth is going to go to. Is it going to go to your church? Is it going to go to are you going to put together some foundations or scholarships for young Black girls at Howard, at University of Maryland College Park Sociology Department? Men and women who are single have that flexibility to make those kind of decisions and conversations. And at some point, everybody's going to deal with being single. Everybody's going to deal with being single. You know, I teach implicit bias to police officers. And I'm like, you know what? A white person may not know what it's like to be Black. A man may not know what it's like to be a woman. But everybody has been single at one point in time. And we know what it's like. So because you know what it's like singlehood is a conversation that everybody should be having.
Yeah.
Whether you're partnered or not. It's like, okay, everybody should be having this conversation because we've all spent some time here. But just make sure that your stuff is in place so that in case something does happen to you, you know where your assets are going to go.
Chris, you brought up something earlier. Well, first of all, Love Jones is one of my favorite movies, and I think the influence of Black love movies is very interesting. Love Jones, Coming to America, Boomerang. I mean, what's it? Love Basketball. There's tons of Black love movies, right? But you mentioned a song earlier, The Lox, Ride or Die Chick, right, which came out. Late 1990s, early 2000s. And I know you've referenced it, and I want to go back to it really quickly because you're right. There's this negative kind of connotation in the Black community that I have seen more than I've seen in other communities about this ride or die chick. What does she look like, and how should she act? And she should do these things, and if she doesn't, then she's not really down for me, or she doesn't really love me, right? I want to kind of touch on that notion of this ride or die and what negative maybe connotations that it may have.
I think we talked about this in our class, Dr. Otley, if I remember correctly. I think you made us watch a movie. What was that movie called? What was the movie called? Paid in Full. Was it that one? I don't know.
Hustle and Flow?
Get Rich or Die Trying. Get Rich or Die Trying.
Oh, Get Rich or Die.
Oh, wow.
I came home after class. I was talking about you. I talked about you. I said, I like this class. I was talking about it. But I know we talked about Ride or Die because I think that is like the 2020, like millennial or whatever we are, like that's our thing. Like, I don't know why it's our thing, but it's our thing. And it's our thing for the wrong reason. It's not my ride or die. I'm going to, be by your side when you're trying to go through school, ride or die, or I'm going to, help you get your stuff to, like, it's not that kind of ride or die. It's like, I'm going to put you through some terrible situations and see if you stand by me. And it's dangerous. And I think we talked about it in relation to the movie because we were talking about this idea of how Black men accumulate wealth and how sometimes they turn to drugs and other quick cash scenarios so that they can provide. And they have girls that are with them that stay with them because they think that there's going to be a positive outcome for them at the end, but it's really not a positive outcome for anyone. You're still in an environment where you don't feel protected. So you're going and doing dangerous things to protect yourself. So that phrase for me is super important because I think it stands for something kind of negative in our society right now.
Absolutely. So, I never know if it's ride and die or ride or die. I think it should be ride and die. If I'm a ride with you, I'm a die with you, but I digress. Here's the point. It's unhealthy, period. Full stop. Anybody that uses the term ride and die, like, what do you mean by that? Again, push back on them. What do you mean by that? Have them look at how toxic and how violent that term actually is. We use it over and over again, and you can talk to 10 different people and they'll have 10 different terms for definitions for what it means. But for the most part, it's like I can send you through so many different things.
Yeah.
Negative things that are toxic, unhealthy, and you stay with me. So that's my ride and die chick. But the other part that we have to also talk about too is that when girls are talking to their girlfriends or when guys are talking to their guy friends and they're talking about the ride or die in that network, in that group, you gotta be like, dude, that's not cool. But there's no accountability, right? So if you don't step up and say, man, you sent her through this, and this, you're complicit in that behavior. So it's one thing for us to individually use it, but collectively as Black America, we've got to push back against that term.
Absolutely. And like Jessica Sanders just said, she said, ride or die scenario, struggle love. And that is really pushed within our community. And I have heard so many men say, my dad said he put my mom through XYZ, and he got this girl pregnant when they were 20, and this. and that's celebrated. And she saved him, she saved his life, and now they're married and they've been together for X amount of years. That struggle love and that like ride or die is, like you said, it's like really romanticized in our community. How much can you withstand before
without breaking?
And
without
then
breaking, right? Yeah.
And then if you don't break after 10 years, I will give you a ring.
Then I'll marry you. So now you won. So now you won, right?
You won the prize, which
you
is
won
my
the prize,
ring.
but you lost your soul.
You complete, and that's what, like today when I posted the post, I mentioned this off air. I posted a post that said that there was this guy, he did a poll. I forgot his name. I can look it up. I wrote it down, and it said that single women are the happiest group. And then a bunch of people said no. His findings are incorrect, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things that comes up is that single women. I'm a single woman, and when I get off work, I get off work. But a married woman, I give you this ring so you can take on what? And I am a huge fan of marriage. I love the covenant of marriage. I desire to be married, this, that, and the third. I'm not anti-marriage. But if you really look at what, depending on how a woman chooses as far as who she marries, she can lose a lot. It's like
right.
Even 29, I think it's about 29% of women, and it's continuing to rise, they're the breadwinner of the family, but their roles are not shifting at home.
Right.
So they're the breadwinner, but they still are coming home and they have the brunt, over 50% of the household domestic, responsibilities. And so It's just like, look, I'm going to put you through this. I had a couple kids. Okay, I may or may not have given you a disease. I did. I did do that thing, and I may or may not have messed up your credit. And so here we are, and you get the ring, and then I'm going to need you to drop out of your. I know you're in law school, but yeah, that doesn't really fit because we're about to move across country. Because the person who moves the most in a marriage is usually the woman. And she's usually the one who loses the most. Her career changes, or she's going to lose the money. There's probably going to be a pay shift. And so it's just like, so when a whole bunch of women, instead of being single, are like, I like being single because of the freedom, that's where that's coming from. Because being a ride or die, something in the woman's life is probably going to die. Several things: purpose, passion, etc.
And it seems to be so prevalent. I know we're at time, but it seems to be so prevalent and prominent in our community specifically. I mean, I have just this, I have a lot of white friends, Hispanic friends, Black friends, but I don't hear those ride or die scenarios or mantras in their lives. It just seems to be something when I go back home and I sit on the block with people I grew up with, you hear those terms, right? And so why do you think the Black community, and Danielle, you know this specifically because of the course we went through together, Black masculinity and toxic masculinity, right? Why is it that we have, as men, Black men, held on to toxic masculinity as if it makes us to be better men, right?
Well, I think from literally from your class and everything you've taught us, I think it's like something that's taught. It's not something that we necessarily were born believing. It's just something that we're taught. Men believe that they have to be the providers. Men believe that they have to be the ones to take care of us. Men believe that they have to withhold a certain standard that we didn't set. And that goes back systemically and systematically, because that is rooted in racism, and that's rooted in oppression, and that's rooted in believing that Black men are people that are supposed to be controlled. And I think that's when it becomes toxic, because they're not able to really know any better because we haven't shown them any better. And that's why I think it's so important that, we're having this conversation and we're including the fact that toxic masculinity does play a role in why women are single.
I just want to make one quick point of clarification. I do most of my work on Black American and Black families and Black singles. But let's be real clear. We don't use the term ride and die in white America, for example. But there's some cruddy things going on in white marriages as well. So I don't want you to think there's only Black people that are doing some of this stuff. White folks are doing it too, but they just have an agreement. Or an arrangement. We call it ride and die. Y'all call it an agreement or an arrangement.
An arrangement. Yeah.
Across the board. Yeah, I ain't gonna talk Black people us on that one. Nah, I'm not gonna.
What did Data call it? She called it an entanglement.
Right. When you got enough money, you can call it an entanglement. You know, it's like yeah. So it's happening across the board. Yeah.
You know, like I said, the sin of being single, my inbox is full of people talking about relationships and breakups, and most of the people that inbox me are white women between the ages of about 28 and 35.
Right.
So, you know, it's
right.
You know, yeah.
Right. And then we'll have to at some point come back and talk about the Black church and how the Black church helps to promote this heteronormative desire to be in these relationships that are unhealthy. Because what kind of singles ministry? All singles ministry is, it tells you how to live save and not have sex to get married.
Thank you.
But what about wealth management? What about acquiring wealth? What about disseminating wealth? We don't talk about those things in the Black church. The Black church is behind the times. The demographic shift is happening, but the Black church has not caught up yet. That Black social institution is behind. But it's academic.
Absolutely. And another thing that in church, in singles ministry, et cetera, there's a heavy burden on women, like you said, just don't have sex and, you know, and cook and clean. I mean, there's all of these things that have nothing to do with the health of the relationship.
Right.
I'm not learning any. I was in singles ministry and every ministry forever. And no one talked about going within, healing within, how to stop toxic patterns in your relationships. It was like, okay, you know, cook, you know, you need to know how to cook and you need to know how to do this. And then, you know, pray and fast. And then this perfect person is going to manifest himself because you have been seen as righteous and holy in the eyes of God. And you're going to have this husband by age 32.
Exactly.
So
you talk about sex, so I want to touch on that just before we close up. We got 5 more minutes, but because I think sex is very steamy. We should talk about sex every week this month. The Danielle scratched her head like, "Holy shit!" But specifically about sex, I'm curious. Well, 2 things. First, I read a study that said that people who are single actually have less sex than people who are married. And that was an old study, maybe 10 years ago. So I'm interested in seeing what the new study is. But the question is that I have about sex is, does sex, do you think as a single person, this could be single, not in a relationship, or single and not married, cloud judgment or one's ability to know if this is a good person or not?
No, absolutely. I think absolutely. We've seen that in every Think Like a Man 1 and 2. We've seen that in every Tyler Perry movie. We've seen that's of course, like sex is always something that is going to kind of cloud judgment. But I also do think that I actually think it's the statistic you found, you just talked about is actually, that doesn't surprise me. I think there are more people actually taking that time to kind of date. I feel like this generation doesn't really know what dating is. Like that is actually courting a woman and actually going out and having conversations and, you know, talking. It's not just going straight to what you want to go to. So I think that we don't date enough. And I think that single women, men, whoever, I think people are kind of going back to that idea of, okay, let me actually try and find someone so that I can start building this life that I want for myself.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. So I have a preacher friend of mine who lives in California. We were talking one day about relationships, and he was talking about, you know, sex can definitely complicate things in a relationship. And he gave me this really great he actually gave me a visual. He's like, you know, if you start off with sex in the relationship, you're at the closest you're ever going to be. And then what happens is that you then grow apart and grow apart and grow apart. And the only thing that's holding you together is sex. And so now you've got goals and aspirations over here, and you got goals and aspirations over here, but you started out at the strongest you were going to be because it was just a sexual relationship, but you're not even compatible at all. So now 10 years later, you're like arguing and fussing about stuff in the relationship. But the reality is you never took the time to build and cultivate the friendship and get to know the person and appreciate the person for who they are and build together with your goals, your aspirations, your spiritual life. You can start out on sex, but that thing's going to fade out like 10 years later. Or you may stick it out because you want to be a ride and die, but yeah, we had 10 years in. But if you start out with sex, that's not anchoring the relationship. You've got to have something that's going to anchor the relationship. That's got to be some kind of spiritual foundation. That's got to be some kind of legacy that you want to build together. That's going to be something. But if you build it on sex, it's not going to go anywhere. And I'm aging myself now, but I think there was a song by Al Green, and it talks about how sex, the assumption is sex will make you come home early or to make you stay out all night long. It will complicate things. You can have the worst sex with somebody, and that's the person that you should be with, but because the sex is bad, you leave them. You can have some good sex with somebody, knowing you have no business being in that toxic relationship, but the sex is good, so you're going to stay.
Mm-hmm.
It happens all the time.
What you said is not an anchor, but we treat it as such. You know, especially as men, a conversation with men all the time, they say, well, I got to test drive the car first. You can't, you know, Danielle mentioned courtship, and guys haven't been taught courtship, but we need to be taught courtship. But I got to test drive this car first, right, to see if it's good. But Chris, I think you make a great point. Sex is not the anchor to the relationship anyway. I mean, if you think about the number of hours that you participate in sex and then the number of hours you participate in other activities, discussions or traveling together or family time, it's small.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But then the unfortunate thing is that you now are with someone because the sex is good, and that's 20 minutes, maybe 30 out of a 24-hour day. Now you got to figure out what the heck you're going to do for the other 23 hours and 30 minutes. And you're stuck.
Right. Yeah. Good. I 100%, I am a huge, I 100% agree with what everybody said. And, you know, and someone will say, and I've had people say, well, people have had sex the first day and went on and got married. That's awesome. But at the end of the day, we are human beings and we're wired a certain way. And so once you introduce the physical too soon, like you said with the analogy, like there's nothing to go back to. I heard a guy say it's like if you're in Florida and once you go all the way to California, it's very difficult. Sex takes you to California. It's very difficult to backtrack the relationship across the country back to Florida. And so like I practice abstinence, and lots of women are like, these men, you know, they're doing these things for you and they're taking you places and blah. I've had people say behind my back that I was lying because there's no way a guy would do this or take her to Paris or all these things, blah, 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 because if she's not giving it up. But if you were to interview these men, a lot of them say there's a difference between my relationship with them and their relationship with other women. Because we didn't go to California first. And so there's intimacy, this really deep intimacy that some have said they haven't experienced before, or even in very long-term relationships, because the physical wasn't introduced really soon. And so, because we were like, well, men don't talk, and they do talk, they do share, but sometimes you have to wait a little bit before you start touching them.
Right.
In order to get here. Because once the penis comes out, it's over. I mean, it can't be over. It's just like, you know, like something just turns off. And it's just human nature. So if you want to, it's good to dig. In that whole test it out. Like, first of all, I'm not a car. We're not cars. And at this point, where I am in life, if the sexual satisfaction of women over the age of 35 is any indication, that whole test out thing isn't really working well. So, you know, like communication, and that doesn't leave room, like you said, you could be with someone and the sex might not be great, but you're not really leaving room for communication with your partner.
Right.
And sexual satisfaction, a lot of that has to do with communication. But if you're just testing things out, oh, well, that didn't work, on to the next. Okay, good luck with that. I think
this goes back to the conversation we were having about the Black church and thinking about abstaining and how does that work, like not having sex until you're in a committed relationship and what that actually looks like. And our people able to do that, both men and women. Women are no stronger than men in that area. It's whether or not men want to stand up and decide if they're going to be disciplined or not.
I agree with that. I think there's like this horrible like stigma that women like don't want to have sex. Like we definitely do. It's just like there's just like a discipline factor. And I think if more men set that discipline factor for themselves, it's so funny that you mentioned, what was it? What did he say? Test drive in the car. Because we talk about that all the time. We say that we've used that phrase several times in our home. And like, it's like if more men actually waited to buy the car and actually took time to get to know
do
the
your
car.
research. Go to CarMax. Do your research.
Right. Miles on it. It would be a worthwhile experience for a lot of people, for sure.
Right. Instead, you're having just baseless sex. You're having baseless sex that has no like emotional connection to it, and there's no level of intimacy. You're just having sex for the sake of having sex.
And if that's what you want, please don't, because please don't inbox me because people. Well, that's what I've had a lot of women like. Well, that's what I want. That's cool. If that's what you want, if you want sex just for the sake of having sex, go do that. I don't yuck anybody else's yum. That is you. You do you. I don't. What I do. I'm not saying that you have to do it, but when it comes to building, and yes, will there be are there stories of people who again had sex the first day and it was amazing? Right. That's awesome. But the majority, okay. Let's talk about how this works. Let's look at the numbers, and it just if you're. And plus, again, married is not the ultimate prize. Because just because someone got married doesn't mean that they have a connection. Doesn't mean that they know each other. Doesn't mean that there is a real deep intimacy going on between them. And so, it depends on what you want. And if what you want is to build something with someone and really get to know someone and really build a deep connection, holding off on the physical in the beginning, it really does do something.
Yeah,
it does.
A good friend of mine, Bishop Frank Gibson, once said that intimacy is into me you see. And there's a lot of men, especially, who are nervous about being that vulnerable. And so we close off our vulnerable parts by just having sex and just, with multiple partners, because it doesn't allow us to be vulnerable. It doesn't allow us to be intimate, right? And so I think that oftentimes we as men, get into these, what they call the modern day, my college students call it situationships. I never even knew what that was. They get into these situationships, right? And they're like, jumping from one to another because they're afraid of being vulnerable, right? And so I think there's got to be some education around, men being intimate, really beyond just sex, and men being vulnerable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, cool. Hey, look, we're right at time. Well, actually, we're over, and there's still folks plugged in. I've got 3 different tabs up from YouTube. Folks are on from Facebook. Folks are watching from the website. This has been an amazing discussion. Danielle, Chris, and Nicole, I really appreciate you. I want to give each of you just a few seconds to kind of, share some last thoughts about this episode, understanding your singleness. Because you said some phenomenal things. So whatever you want to say to kind of end the conversation tonight, please do.
I'll just say thank you so much for hosting this conversation. It's not had it enough, and I think it's something that we need to continue to have. I was nervous to join because this is an area that is different for me. I'm a young student, and I'm in a committed relationship, and that is different from, being single. But I think I've learned and benefited from this conversation about saving my assets and making sure I leave them to somebody and getting my stuff together, and, really just actually having the opportunity to talk to other women outside of like my mom, about important things that we don't talk about enough. So I appreciate you guys. Much love. And thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Danielle.
One of the things that I did not say, and I think Nicole mentioned this, she's like, we're talking about romantic relationships, but we're just talking about Black love, whether or not it's with siblings, whether or not it's with students and professors, whether or not it's with colleagues, peers, people that we just have relationships with. One of the things that I often say to people, and I think is really, really important, and I think Nicole mentioned communication. Communication, I say it all the time, and I say it here as well. The truth only hurts after a lie.
Mm. Wow.
The truth may be bittersweet, But give me the truth first and let me make a decision. Do not give me the truth after a lie, because that's when it hurts. Whether or not it's my students, if my students didn't do their homework assignment, just tell me you didn't do your homework assignment. Don't lie to me. Don't lie to me. Tell me that you got a flat tire. You got a flat. The truth only hurts after a lie. And we need to think about that when we think about relationships that we're in, whether or not they're romantic or non-romantic. The truth only hurts after a lie.
Yeah, I like that. Truth only hurts after a lie. Celebrate your singleness. Brought to you, Dr. Chris Marsh.
Yeah. Make sure you're in a relationship where you're wanted and not needed.
Yeah, that's big. That's key. Okay. All right, Nicole.
My last thought is like my first thought, self-care. It's really, really, really important to get to know yourself. Whether you desire marriage, whether you desire to be coupled with someone, really, really buckling down and knowing what your core needs and your core values are and honoring those and making a decision in life, not just in relationships, but in, like I said, purpose and, passion and just the trajectory of your life is really, really important, because we all have the ability to live our best version of, be the best version of ourselves. But often so many different things, society, stuff that's been like, oh, you need to be married by this time. You need to have kids by this time. You need to do this. You need to look like this. You need to have a house and a car and this and this and this by this age. All that stuff begins to write our story. We are the author. This is a choose your own adventure book. That's how I see life. So like we're the author, and you need to take the pen back and really just dig into yourself and heal. Healing is everything. And whatever that looks like, however you do that is how you do that. But really just being honest with yourself and really looking at the patterns in your life. Am I always in a job that I hate? Am I always in a relationship that ends this way? What are those things that, why does this always happen to me? Or why is this always the case? That's where you need to start. And so healing and self-love and self-care. And of course, come follow me at Sin of Being Single on Instagram.
I would do that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I like that too. Nicole, you said you're the author, so take the pen back. Wow. Yes. That thing, I mean, I've been taking notes. Y'all helping me prepare for next week. I mean, y'all said some really, really, really good stuff that I want to make sure we take into to dating. We'll talk a little bit about dating next week. We'll also have a male panel. Because I'm curious as to some of these stereotypes that we men have carried for years. Talk a little bit about toxic masculinity and how we have held on and embraced that culture as if it was our own. And Danielle knows this when African.
You might have to have me back on next week.
When African Americans were brought, when Africans were brought to America, we talked about this in class. There were a lot of Africans who learned the culture from white supremacist culture. We learned that from watching others, and there are annals and stories and writings and muses that talk about how the Black woman and then the Black man were co-creators of their relationship and co-creators of their home. It wasn't follow the man wherever he goes. And so how that toxic masculinity has just passed down through the ages, and we have embraced it. So I want to talk a little bit about that as well. So we're going to have a phenomenal month. Those who are still on, I can't believe folks are still on. It's a good number of y'all who are still watching. I guess y'all didn't want us to end this conversation. Chris, Nicole, Danielle, we usually end right at 9. This is the longest that we've ever gone. But those who may have missed it from the beginning, you can replay this on any of my Facebook pages, as well as YouTube, or as well as ourvillageinaction.com website. Please follow Nicole at Sin of Being Single on Instagram. And Chris and Danielle, what are y'all's Instagram pages in case people want to follow the work and stuff that you're doing?
Mine is at Dr. Chris Marsh. All of my social media is the same, at Dr. Chris Marsh.
And mine's the same too. So you can just do at Danielle Germain _ on most social media, and my face will come up.
Okay, I'm gonna follow y'all. So y'all better take my Hope you take all people on your website. You better take all people, us senior citizens.
Right. And I said this in the beginning, kind of joking, but I'm serious. If any of you who are listening want to increase your social media, I mean, these three phenomenal women, I mean, in 24 hours, my social media has gone crazy. And I know it's not because of me, it's because they've been posting the flyer. And so thank you, the three of you who brought great conversation tonight and brought your followers tonight. We got to do a part two. There's no way that we could just kind of end it like this. There's got
Right.
we got through one question that was on the list.
Oh, wow.
It was, no, just one question. And we just kind of like, organically moved throughout. I didn't even ask the other ones. There's a bunch of chats I had. Yeah, I didn't get to all that. So we've got to definitely do a part two.
Right.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the three of you have a great evening. Thank you again for coming on tonight. We really, really enjoyed you. Remind your friends, your followers, and your family they can replay this all as long as they want. It's indefinitely on YouTube and Facebook. They can play it forever. Love to have you guys join us again next week. Even if you're not as a panel, come back and listen to more great conversation this entire month about single, sex, love, relationships, how dating has changed in the modern age. All right, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, take care.
All right, thank you.
I can't see.
I didn't have my glasses on either.
They're all scratched up. I was like, I ain't putting these glasses on. They're all scratched up. He's like, Dr. Marsh ain't got no money. She can't afford the new glasses. I'm like, nope, not gonna do it.
I was like, I hope I don't have to read too much. Because
Right. I was like, I can't see. Somebody's saying something down there. Like, I can't see. But
All right, well, I'm going to end it because we're still live.
oh my God. Oh my God.
I just want to say until I put the end button, we're still live. So there's still people tuning in. But thank you
guys. Okay, bye guys.
See you guys. Bye.